I think it's working on it. Let's see, are we live? That is the question. Okay, we are live, but I think there's a time delay maybe on the thing. So I'm going to see if I can share it though, real quick to your page. Let's see. Change. Cancel. Share to page. No, I want to share it to a group. Okay. I think I did share it to your group, hopefully. But we're here, we're live. I see one person watching so far. We might be on a little bit of a time delay. So if anybody is watching and you put a comment or question, I'm going to watch those, but just give me a minute to see them. So I'm going to be excited to say Papa Hood is in the house. I just thought that would be a fun way to introduce you. This is Papa Hood from Papa Hood's Sorcery, and I'm hoping that they can see you because it's on a little bit of a delay. So I'm going to ask you a question and let you start talking and see if they can see you. That may work the best. So you run Papa Hood's Sorcery. Just give us a little rundown on what you do, because you're basically a professional sorcerer, or is that, what kind of title would you go by?
No, I feel that's pretty accurate. I use the term sorcerer versus something like wizard or witch because I feel like sorcery is probably the most accurate and yet non-laughable term for what I do. But we do everything there from ritual kits with poppets and candles and ribbons and shiny things to attunements and oils and services, things like that. Really it's a group effort. I'm kind of the public face of and driving force behind it, but I've got so many people to support what I do that I can't say I anymore,
Mm-hmm. Very cool, because I did notice you run a Facebook group, and hopefully we're live in there because it's a really great Facebook group, The Thorny Path. And so you have a lot of admins in there. Are a lot of those people that you work with? And
they are actually. So my admin team at The Thorny Path and my Papa Hood Sorcery support group are basically the same people. You've got, me, obviously. My fiance / might as well be wife, Samantha, who carries the brunt of the force and gets most of my frustration because she lives with me. Charles, we more or less started Papa Hood Sorcery together. He helped me with my web design and getting everything set up, and then he kind of just hired on doing work there, and he branched off into his own site. So he does his own work, but we also collaborate from time to time. And then there's his wife, Helen, who came in, I believe, before he moved into his new site. So she helped us with a bit of stuff with Papa Hood Sorcery, and now she works with him over at the Rose Quartz Labyrinth. So, they have their own thing, we have our own thing, but we collaborate for each other quite frequently. And then, I've got a number of students and fans, supporters, things like that are spread across Facebook and Twitter, Reddit, etc. That kind of, they don't help me in any official capacity, but just having people out there that spread the word is pretty helpful,
Yeah, well, just so I don't forget about this, but if anybody's interested in magic at all, I think that that what you've got there in that group is just really nice, because I've been in a lot of Facebook groups. In a lot of them, there are either like crickets, not a whole lot of activity, or a lot of backbiting and just, drama. And it's like the container or the energy in there is just really nice, because it seems like for the most part, everybody's just very supportive and helpful and jumping on there to give suggestions and help people out. And I really like it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we wanted to cultivate. It was hard. It's hard to get it to the point where everybody interacts, but I kind of feel like we're there,
You are, yeah, you definitely are.
Well, there used to be days where the only person that posted for weeks was either me or Charles, and now I can walk away from the group and come back and there's posts and comments and activity, and it just, I like to take a bit of pride in creating an atmosphere where people of all practices can come together, and even when they disagree, they do so civilly. We don't really have many of the problems a lot of the bigger groups have, because we get along. It's in our rules to be respectful.
Yeah, which is really great. But a lot of them have that rule and it still doesn't happen. So it's really nice that you guys have cultivated that atmosphere in there. But I guess I want to switch past and kind of go. I just was talking to you briefly about how you started on this path at age 12. So can you share a little bit about what got you onto the spiritual occult path and kind of how you've evolved?
Yeah. Honestly, it was just pure curiosity. Like I said, I started when I was 12, but I didn't really seek it out. I actually made a comment in front of my mother how cool it would be if, magic was a thing that was real. And this was in like September, I think. I didn't think anything about it until Christmas. I opened up, my first spell books that she got me, and they're simple spell books, but they're things that I still have on my shelf in there. One of them was a book of Norse magic, and one of them was a book of just raw elemental magic. And from there, I played with those for a while, got used to the feel of it, got some results, and got excited, and then from there, I moved more into the religious aspect, to where it, not necessarily religious, but to where it was more than just something I did. It was becoming a lifestyle. I started studying Wicca first, and then I moved from Wicca to Norse paganism, and that really wasn't my home, so I moved from there to Egyptian, and I kind of bounced around a little bit trying to find my home. Eventually, I actually got a copy of the Necronomicon, and it felt more like home than anything else, even though there's a whole long thing about it. I could diatribe for hours. That was the book that started me towards true necromancy, and that's kind of been where I found my home at. There were a bunch of bumps in the road. It wasn't exactly easy for a 12, 13-year-old kid to run around trying to do something that, for my part of the country, is so taboo that they would probably have burned me alive a couple hundred years ago, or even a couple dozen years ago. But it was worth the struggle.
Very cool. So for people who don't know what necromancy is, can you explain a little bit briefly?
Oh, I could explain a lot, I suppose.
I'm sure you could.
The simple explanation is that necromancy originally developed as divination only. If you take the prefix necro as meaning corpse, and the suffix mancy as meaning divination, as in, aromancy, geomancy, etc., it is strictly divination with the use of a corpse. Largely, I won't say originated with the Greeks, but they were certainly some of the biggest propagators of the practice, from burying certain tablets with corpses so that the soul would rise after death, to actually going down into the catacombs for ritual meditation.
Is it related to like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or is that something that they practice?
No, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is more it's kind of confusing because it's meant for after death, but it is meant to be read and understood beforehand.
Okay.
It describes what happens to the soul when the physical body dies, the different realms you go to, the possibilities of what could happen, and it also gives processes for transmuting the soul into something purer so that you can go to higher planes.
Okay. Gotcha. So you're more like trying to get, or not getting information from people who are dead.
That is the classical translation. But as the modern world is ought to do, we have redefined and redefined and redefined it until necromancy has come to be associated to any magic performed with the dead. So I still do stick to the strict definition of necromancy as corpse divination. I keep several different skulls and bones and things around for divining through the dead, but I also work, what would be called modern necromancy. But I do draw the line at people who say they practice necromancy, and by doing so, they mean they evoke gods and demons and don't deal with the dead at all. If you don't deal with the dead, it's not necromancy. Plain and simple.
Okay. Makes sense. So in a way, is it kind of like, I don't know if I would like, because I know in hoodoo sometimes they read bones. Are you kind of like working with the bones to connect with the spirits of the people who's used to be like the bones of the person that, okay, I'm not explaining this well at all, but I guess like if you have a human bone that you're like meditating with, is that how you would do it?
Sometimes like I've got a skull on my altar now, a human skull, and the information I have is that it is from a female from South America. They don't give names and all that for various reasons. Maybe they were withheld, maybe they don't want to insult the family, etc. But through the use of necromancy, I have been able to connect directly to the original owner of the skull. I guess is the best term. But I also use, the bones and things as channels to other spirits. It's kind of like, with it being a bone specifically, it's got that connection to death and to the afterlife. So it's an easy channel for not only the original owner, but for anybody that is willing to step through.
Okay. That's it. So you don't necessarily need to work with that just to work with the spirit of the person who once owned that skull, or was not owned it, but was alive with that skull. You can channel other people. Right.
I don't, it is helpful to have bones of the deceased you're working with. But it's like in voodoo, if you can get a piece of someone's shirt, then it's easier to work magic on them, but you don't necessarily need it to work magic on them.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So let me ask you about some of the other stuff or actually let's go back, because a lot of my my audience are really new to magic and occult. They're maybe coming from a law of attraction perspective and just like getting interested in doing more things. So I know you have a book, the Spirit Work Primer, and that's for somebody who's starting out. So like, tell me a little bit about like that book, and maybe just about what you think if someone who is like brand new and they're like, whoa, necromancy, that's way down the road or way away from where I might want to start to dive into this kind of stuff. So where would you recommend someone who's just kind of coming over from that kind of perspective would start?
Ironically enough, there's a form of necromancy that I recommend as a beginning step for anybody, and it's actually found in a lot of Wiccan and pagan texts as a core foundation, and that is the family altar, the ancestor altar. I don't know if you watch Disney movies, but the one that came out, I think, late last year, Coco, it's set in Mexico, and it's about Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, which is the day that your deceased ancestors can cross from the other side to the physical world to visit their family. And the whole thing behind that movie was they had an ofrenda, or a family altar, where they honored their ancestors. And if you were on the ofrenda, then you could come from the other side here. I know I won't spoil the movie. If anybody out there is planning to watch it, you should watch it. It's a good movie. Um, but that is necromancy at one of its basest forms. You know, you are honoring those who've come before you. You are saying thanks to your family for, making you, and you're ensuring that they survive into the afterlife by keeping their memory alive. So that is actually a form of necromancy I recommend for everybody. And I believe that's actually mentioned in the primer, in the basics section, I think.
Okay.
But I actually wrote this book because it is a firm belief of mine that the absolute most basic form of magic that has existed since the beginning of time is working with spirits. In every form, from prayer to possession, invocation, to offerings, everything that magic originated in deals with spirits. So to me, if you can build a firm foundation with spirits and learning how to invoke, evoke, give them homes, let them take possession, things like that, then you can work any form of magic you want because it all grows out of that.
That makes sense, yeah.
And there are some people who would argue with me and say, oh no, Qigong is, the oldest form of magic because it deals with energy work, and they may be right. Specifically going through, carbon dating per se, energy work may be older than spirit work. I personally believe they were birthed at the same time, but I don't know. I kind of feel like spirit work was probably the first thing.
Yeah, I guess I wonder because for me, I think of like everything is energy. So we came from energy. So like that, like to me, all the different gods are just personifications. I mean, not that they're any less real than we are, because I kind of feel like, we're like an avatar of God too. And we're all kind of coming from that same energy. So it would kind of make sense that energy work and spirit work, even though they're different, they're still they're kind of the same thing, except for it's spirit work. You're just working with like an individuation of energy. Whereas when we connect with each other, we're working with a physical individuation of energy. I don't know.
And that's actually something that is hit on in several communities, very specifically in the more pagan-minded branch of the Jedi community. After George Lucas's movies came out, they became a hit in several spiritual communities, and the real-life Jedi movement basically started. And essentially, their belief is that there's the Force, and it flows through everything, and blah 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 blah. But your pagan community takes a step further and believes that the Force is, but that it personifies itself through the faces of deities to better connect with people who need that more personal connection.
Yeah.
This is personally a belief that I hold, is that there's the divine energy out there. There is the divine source that is impersonal, but that it personifies into different deities based on what its people need. To the Greeks, it needed, Zeus and Hera. To the Egyptians, it needed Ra and Osiris and Isis, and to the Celts, it needed the Morrigan and Menonomic Lear, and so on and so forth.
That makes sense. That kind of goes pretty much hand in hand with what I believe, that, that the energy comes to us personified in the way that works best for a certain group of people or for that particular person who's working with them.
Yeah.
So, but that's really interesting because I've done ancestor altars for probably 6 or 7 years now, and my daughter's really working on that. So that's interesting because I guess in my brain I thought that was something different than necromancy, but it makes sense. A lot of the stuff that seems like so kind of on the fringe and esoteric is not, you know what I'm saying? A lot of us are doing some of these practices, whether or not we call them by that kind of name, and maybe not to the depth that you do, but still already practicing.
And I mean, to take it a step further, you mentioned that a lot of your crew works with law of attraction. Well, the law of attraction, I honestly, I'll be honest, I'm unfamiliar with the exact wording of the law, but basically it means that whatever you put out there comes back to you, right? Well,
basically, yeah, like attracts like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at the 7 Hermetic principles, all magic and all mysticism in the world can be traced back to these 7 principles. The principle of mind, the principle of vibration, rhythm, gender, uh, etc. Basically, there's seven laws, 7 statements that boil all of the universe down into all is mind, which means everything that exists is just a mental projection, essentially, and all has its polar opposites. And so I'm not going to go into all of them, but basically, I believe, second law is the law of vibration. The law of vibration states that all things vibrate at a certain frequency, so that if you can match your vibration to the frequency of something you want, you can manifest it. And similarly, if you can force someone else's vibration to vibrate to a desired outcome, whether it's a positive or negative outcome, you essentially force them to attract that outcome to themselves. So even the law of attraction is founded on ancient mystical principles. It's just not necessarily recognized directly as such.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let me ask you, I have, like, my daughter and I have this raging debate going back and forth talking about, people seem to have different definitions, as it is with everything, but like right hand path and left hand path, because a lot of people were kind of like, the left hand path is like the scary evil path, and the right hand path is the light and love path. But to me, it was like the left hand path is like anybody who's doing anything in the world to like make an impact, maybe energy wise. But instead of, in the right hand path is just like, I may just pray and meditate with no outcome desired on my part, more like the Buddhist, like letting all go of desires. And so in that way, I feel like, almost all of us would be on the quote left hand path. I don't know. Have you heard people throw around that terminology? And
I've heard left hand, right hand. I've even heard middle hand path. And when you look at my definition of the paths, middle hand makes no sense. I'm guilty of that one. I used to throw that one around because I had wrong beliefs. But I've actually pretty much preached about false dichotomies. So, everyone equates right hand to good, to light, to purity, and left hand to evil, darkness, and corruption. But these aren't the case. These are all their own separate polarities. So good and evil exist over here, and right hand and left hand exist over here. You can be, the wickedest person on the face of the earth and still be right hand path. In fact, I know some people that. But the way I define it in simplest, most broad strokes I can is it's your view of where God is. If you believe that God is some external force that is separate from humanity and that you need to seek the face of this God to bring blessing and change and etc., you're right hand. If you believe that God is within all of us and that you have the power and authority to inflict change yourself, you're left hand. The reason being is that your right hand path is typically found as being those that go through the priesthood. They are the ones that, make offerings and light candles and invoke whatever deity it is they're working with to inflict change. Whether it's the Morrigan or Hades or Lucifer, or whoever, you are bowing down and saying, I'm putting this in your hands, please take care of it. Whereas your left hand path will approach the gods and say, hey, look, I need your help. But, we're still equals, essentially. And I've argued this point for years and years, but I can't change everyone's mind on that. It's just not going to happen. So some people are going to disagree with me, and there are some people out there who proclaim to be left-hand path, and then their entire magic book is how to bow down to this demon and ask them to do something for you. So I guess ultimately it comes down to your personal definition, but my personal definition is that your left-hand path are those that believe that they are essentially on the same level as gods, and your right hand are those that believe that God is something to be worshipped.
That makes sense. Listen, I like those definitions. Yeah. You just hear so many different I guess it's just like anything, like the word witch, there's so many different definitions for that. And like so many people have a different perspective on what that means. And so many, I don't know. It seems like it's a lot in the occult world that different people are saying the same words and talking about totally different things.
Yeah. We're talking about the same thing and using different words. Like people who say, "Oh no, you cast spells, so you're a witch," and no, I call myself a sorcerer. Who cares? Call yourself whatever you want. Just do your thing.
Right. And I think we were talking about before how like some of those terminologies can throw people off because they're saying, oh, spells are bad and evil, but then affirmations are fine. So, yeah. But really an affirmation to me is just a spell. It's words that you're using. You're putting power into those words to create something. So to me, that would be the same thing as a
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting how just the way people say things in words can give certain people a twirl and make them think that something's bad or evil when it's exactly the same thing that they're doing, just by a different word.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, and that's something that I remember a long time ago. A friend of mine, their mother was a very devout Christian, and she had a keychain that I can't remember what it was, but basically it was a prayer for safety, asking your guardian angel to watch over the car or something. And I had a giggle because I was like, so, you can put rhyming words on a keychain and have it supposed to protect you, and it's cool. But if I do it, then I'm burned.
Right. Yeah. It's like kind of the same thing. So I know that you do, and I was also going to tell people, I'm getting ahead of myself. I know on your website you have some really cool free stuff because I was poking around on there and I saw that you have some free attunements that people can go on there and just kind of read through and follow the instructions to do. I know you had one that was an allowing abundance and then an eyes wide open one. You had some other ones too, but those two really stood out to me as something that's a really simple technique that you can do that's like not it's basically a lot of the same stuff that law of attraction people do, but I just wanted to see if you could tell me a little bit like more about what your definition of the word attunement is, because a lot of people in my community are Reiki masters, and I know you're a Reiki master and you also teach Reiki and do the attunements through your website, but a little bit about the other attunements that you do.
Yeah, sure. So basically, because you're a Reiki master and they're Reiki masters, so you know that an attunement is basically an initiation. With Reiki, it's an initiation into a specific lineage and specific current to allow you to access that energy for healing. Let's take the eyes wide open, since you mentioned that's one that I actually wrote. The eyes wide open is an attunement in the way that Reiki is, in that it is an initiation to a specific current, but it is not the same thing because it is not a healing system. It doesn't, it's kind of hard to explain it compared to Reiki, I guess, but it attunes you to the energy that is in the eyes wide open, but because it's not a modality, it's not like something that has to be used often, I guess. Eyes wide open is coded very specifically to awaken the Ajna chakra, third eye. And I designed that one because I was at that time working in a community where everybody wanted to work with spirits, but nobody could sense them. So having had practice for many, many years, obviously I'm able to sense them. So I meditated and entered that state of openness and connectivity. And then essentially in the same way that you create an anchor in hypnosis, I created a psychic anchor to that energy and wrapped it up in the attunement. But that's a more minor attunement. That's something that you accept. You do some exercises, the energy flows through you and runs autonomously. Reiki as an attunement, you accept, you're tuned into the Reiki energy, you can channel it, you can access it. You can increase the flow, decrease the flow, things like it's an active energy. Then there are things that I offer like Kali Naga Shamanic Power, which is a 4-tier system, and it's not just an initiation that runs autonomously. It's not just something that you can activate and deactivate. It's an actual initiation into a system. So by receiving this attunement, you are able to connect to more spirits and the spirits behind this work. And it's like a license to work. If you approach Mahakali and the Naga spirits who serve her as someone who does not hold this initiation, they'll probably still work with you, whatever. But if you have this initiation, they'll be able to say, they see it, recognize it, say, oh, you are in this current, you are able to handle this level of energy. We can do this much more for you. So I guess the short version is an attunement is an initiation, but it's also a license to work and a license to use a current. And at certain things, it's also a license to be able to give that current to others.
Okay, that makes sense. So very similar to Reiki, but not all of them are systems. Some of them are just opening you up to a certain current of energy.
Yeah, it's tuning your system in and upgrading your system to be able to use an energy you couldn't use previously. I guess is probably a better way for me to word that. It's like saying, okay, well, you have a flip phone. Here's a smartphone for you to use too, so you can get on the internet, I guess.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's kind of, to me, like with Reiki, a lot of people can do hands-on energy healing just, naturally. But once they've been attuned to Reiki, then they have like a whole different charge of energy to use because they're able to tap into that.
Absolutely. And Reiki works so well for so many people because it's very specifically not something that comes out of you. It's just something that comes through you. But some people, like natural energy healers, some are very comfortable with this and some are not. And for them, I recommend something more like Kundalini. Kundalini comes out of you. It comes from within you, but it's Kundalini energy. So it's more of a warm energy that's flowing through you. And then there's things like Seishim. Seishim is very similar to Reiki. In fact, you have to be Reiki attuned before you use it. But instead of coming from the divine source, it's more chthonic. It comes more from the earth. So, there's a variety of systems. If, Reiki isn't your thing, maybe Seishim or Kundalini.
Okay, that's interesting. I need to learn more about Seishim because I'm really interested. I don't know if it's just because I'm a Virgo or whatnot, but I've always been really interested in the earth energies, and I'd like to do, kind of those meditations where you're connecting with land, connecting with the earth. So that seems like that would be a really interesting.
It's definitely fun. My personal favorite is Kundalini, simply because, Kundalini has, I believe, 8 levels. I'm attuned to 5. I have to wait a certain time period before I can move higher than that. But Kundalini or Jitumo, is you might have heard of it, is you've got Respa, which is the first level, then you've got High Respa, Personal Master, and then Vajra Master. And those are your first 4 levels. At Vajra Master, you can give initiation, you can do all this. But then it moves up. The 5th level is called the White Mahakala level. White Mahakala is a deity from Tibetan lore who is a deity of wealth. And there's a whole story behind him. But essentially, when you reach the 5th level and are tuned to White Mahakala, now not only can you access the Jitumo energy to heal others, but you can also access the White Mahakala Jitumo energy to attract abundance into your life and the life of others. And also above Vajra Master, you can be attuned to certain etheric tools and weapons so that you don't have to actually have this $10,000 battle axe, that is attuned to certain spiritual energies to banish demons. You're attuned to that energy directly so that you can banish demons just by accessing that power. So there's a whole array of things that attunements can do that I just am personally a fan of.
That's cool. So if somebody has just been attuned maybe to Reiki or not been attuned to any of these energies, where would you suggest that they might want to start? Or is it just personal preference?
It really is a lot of personal preference. But for me, selfishly speaking, I'd recommend starting with the eyes wide open, simply because it's irrespective of religion, it's irrespective of spirituality. It's not a, you have to be Tibetan to use this kind of thing. It's just a simple boost where you can get used to how an attunement feels, and it'll amplify your psychic senses, and it gives you some exercises to go deeper with. So, I mean, it's fairly simple, straightforward, a basic system, you know. And if you like it, then if you enjoy that attunement, you're probably going to like Reiki and everything else that comes along with it. And if you don't like it, I mean, it's very specifically in my copyright that it has to be given freely, so you're not out any money.
That's true. That is a great place for them to start and look at that. And we talked a little bit about how, a family altar is kind of like a beginning stage of necromancy. And so if someone's brand new to doing that, how would you suggest that they start? Maybe getting your book would be a good start so they can learn some there. But
I always encourage people to buy 10 copies, But seriously, yeah, my book is a good place for any spirit work, especially necromancy, because all the principles that apply to, angels, gods, and demons apply to the dead too. It's just that a lot of people are put off by the dead because they're scared of death. They are uncomfortable with graveyards, et cetera, et cetera. But beyond that selfish plug, if you're going to get started with like a family altar, the way I started was I got a little card table, folding table thing, and I put a white cloth on it, which in retrospect was a bad idea because I spilled lots of stuff on it, stained fast. Black would probably been a better choice, whatever. And I got pictures of my family. I started with who I could, my parents. They're not dead, but it's a family altar. It's not necessarily a dead altar, so you can honor the living on a family altar, no problem. I started with them, added my grandparents, went to my great-grandparents, and then I started on Ancestry.com, and I started tracing my family line and getting what pictures I could from that. So I basically gathered up all the pictures I could, arrayed them on the altar, and I left a space in the front and in the middle where I could lay out flowers and food, drinks, candles. I tried to aim for what, like my grandpa, I knew him, and I knew one of his favorite things in the world was ice cream. That's where I get it from. I'd set out a bowl of vanilla ice cream and a shot of bourbon, things like that. But if you can't get what they like, if you don't know what they like, go from the heart, do what feels right, but lay out some offerings. And essentially, you're wanting to thank your family, because if you think about it, you can summon a demon and he say, no, I'm not going to help you. You can pray to a god and they say, oh no, you stepped on a butterfly and that's my sacred animal, so I'm not going to work with you until you apologize. Your ancestors are always going to be there because, their entire lives work towards what you are today. My grandfather did many, many great things in his life. But among them, he fathered my father, who fathered me, which means that I am a living emanation of my grandfather's life, my grandfather's work. And because of that, he is going to have my back and say, no, you are my legacy. I've got to I've got to watch out for you. Yeah, you can alienate your ancestors in different ways, but usually doesn't last long because they're dead. They don't have any reason to hold grudges.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it, and that's how I've always found it to be true, is that they may not like you this week, but come next week they will.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt too, like if you work on something and you heal something within yourself, that you're kind of healing it like back through your family line, and you're healing it forward through your family line too. And because it seems like a lot of these, I don't know for sure if it's like these patterns of vibration, they continue down generationally. And so if you take the time to like heal that, I feel like, even though they say you don't you can't change the past, I feel in a way that maybe you can a little bit. I don't know, but I definitely feel like that energy goes back to them too. So it's kind of like when you're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your ancestors too. And then, yeah, I guess you can just take it all the way out to the energy that we came from. So,
yeah, I agree. And that's actually, there's a very specific type of necromancy. It's called amatory necromancy, where you work very specifically with the spirits of the ancestors, usually yours, but someone in my position, might do it for a client. But you work not only with the person directly or with yourself, but also with their ancestors and even to some extent their descendants, in order to take a look and say, okay, well, your family has a history of heart disease and it's echoed down into you. So if we can work with you and fix whatever it is in your energy and in their energy to repair that damage, we repair it for the future generations. Same for emotional trauma, mental trauma, things like tendencies. Like my family has a tendency towards alcoholism, which is very specifically why I don't drink often. In fact, I almost exclusively drink when it's for the purposes of ritual, because I have very actively performed magic and meditation and path working towards breaking that in myself and healing the damages caused backwards for my family.
Mm. Yeah. It's really cool how, obviously we're linked to our ancestors, but I do think that when you've done work like that, you start to where you can actually feel the healing that you've done for them. And then that you're healing it for your future generations too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So I know I asked you about the attunements. What other types of services do you do for people on your website?
Excuse me. As far as the listing goes, I only offer one form of service, which is through necromancy, because everything I do is stronger with necromancy. It just is. But through necromancy, we can do healing, we can do empowerment, opening avenues of opportunity, things like that. Really all sorts of things. I found the dead work best for gathering wealth. Maybe that's, because of their ties. Necromancy was originally formed to find hidden treasure and to find things the dead have left behind the living can have. So maybe that's why they work better for wealth. I don't know. But yeah, I do all sorts of work. I've taken a number of custom requests. I think though my personal favorite thing has always been to just take a very general approach to things. Someone comes to me with a problem, say they financial stress or love life problems, things like that. I usually opt for what I call a road opening ritual. And that is designed to basically take a look at your life and say, okay, well, you're trying to seek love, but my reading is telling me that you have a blockage there. Let's open up the blockage, open the avenue, and basically allow success to flow in your life. Because I find when you do something generalized like that, like a road opener, usually it doesn't only improve the thing that you're wondering about, but it improves your health, your finances, everything all in one shot. Because we don't focus on one thing, we focus on opening everything to success. And this actually looks into the Hermetic principle of rhythm, which basically is everything has a backwards and forward swing. So the way I've always explained it is that I don't have a pendulum hand per se, but if you have a pendulum, it swings back and forth. So if one side of the pendulum swing is negative and one side is positive, then it is our job as magicians to take the pendulum and move the center point closer to positive, so that even on the middle of the swing, you're still in good health and good opportunity. which is what I do with the road opener, is I try to move that center point closer to positive outcomes.
I like that. That's a good way to explain it. It makes sense, because there's always going to be that back and forth swing. But yeah, if you can move the center point, makes sense. I know we were talking before that you started really young on this path, and so I was curious as to, like, when was that point? You know, your mom bought you the Book of Spells. When was that point when you're like, oh, I did something and I actually got a result. I made something happen. Like, do you have one of those as like your first experiences where you knew that you created the outcome?
I actually do. You know, I worked a number of spells for, you know, raising power and manifesting things and all this, and I had some small movement. I had my most success with spirit communication, actually, which I guess could be foreshadowing my path into necromancy. But the first real thing that I got movement on was a curse, actually. And I put a blurb about this into my Hellfire book. But essentially, there was somebody at my school at the time. I think I was 13 or 14, and this person was not awful per se, but this person's group of friends was awful. Their group of friends and my group of friends were always at odds. We were hiding each other's shoes in garbage cans, and you know, all the other sorts of things you do when you're in middle school. Except that I happened to be the only person who knew anything about mysticism, because we're in the South. I'm in South Georgia right now. I grew up in North Florida. We are in the deep South, which means that if anybody around here had even found such a book at my age, their parents probably would have locked them in the basement and started throwing holy water at them. So I took it upon myself to do a little bit of overkill on this, and I performed a binding and a banishment. Essentially, I had collected, I think it was either some hair off a hairbrush they brought to school, or a piece of paper with their name on it or something. And I made a paper doll. You know, I just took some notebook paper, cut it out, cut up some strips of paper to stuff in it, put my link to the person in there, and I stapled it all shut. Can't believe I stapled a poppet, but whatever. I took this poppet and I took it home, and I did the 9-knot binding spell, which is the infamously popular spell on the internet of by knot of 1 the spell's begun, by knot of 2 this is true, etc., etc. And I did this binding on this person, and I buried it, and essentially declared to the universe that I was tired of this person and their friends bothering me and mine, and I wanted them out of my life. And it came out, I think, a month later. She disappeared from the school. Didn't know where she was. It came out that she had been sleeping with an 18-year-old. And clearly her parents did not look too kindly on this, nor did the school, being a Christian school, and they essentially packed her up and shipped her off to live with her aunt in Alabama, which is very far away from me at that age. Of course, this is before the time of Facebook and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But when she, with her out of the way, the rest of the friends kind of chilled out because she was the main instigator, you know. So I gave it a couple of weeks before I celebrated and thanked the gods and all that, because I wanted to be absolutely sure that was the first real manifestation of work that I had that was verifiable and that I could say was absolutely my work.
It's interesting. I was just actually talking with Stella's Sea Spirit the other day, doing an interview, and her first was a freezing spell where someone, I can't remember if they moved away, but that was also one of my first. So it seems like a lot of times people start trying to just get bad influences out of their life. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it too is, energy comes from emotion. So we may not be in a high emotional state when we're all like, oh, please let me get this house or whatever we're doing magic for. But when we come home, we're like, you know what? I'm going to put this bitch in a jar. And I'm going to throw some vinegar on it, and I'm going to put some peppers in there. And it worked because we're in such a high state of emotion, and performing the act of the curse is cathartic. It is a release. And this is something I talk about as being one of the key components of spell work, is that you have to do the work, yeah, but then you have to let it go. It's like reaching catharsis during ritual. You have to say, okay, I've done my part. It's your job as the universe to manifest it. Because if not, if you get hung up on it in what we call lust for result, then your work is never going to manifest, because it can't, because you're holding on to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in the law of attraction world, a lot of times you call it resist, like what we resist persists, or what we hold on to tightly, we can't actually manifest, because you're, instead of actually focusing on what you want, you're focusing on what you don't want, because you're constantly thinking about the fact that it hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's funny how they overlap, even though people think that they're very different. Like you talked about, it's very same, just law of vibration, law of attraction. So.
Oh yeah. And like we were talking about earlier, I used to work with a community of people, and I would explain the 7 Hermetic laws to them, and they'd say, "Oh, that's law of attraction. That's great." Da 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 da. And I say, "Okay, well, if you're going to manifest it, then maybe you should make this oil and use this oil on your vision board to bring it about." "Oh, I can't do that. That's witchcraft. That's bad." All right, whatever, cool.
Yeah, to me, like the oils and things, I mean, just for example, like you say, the oil, like if it's made from certain herbs, those herbs hold a vibration that's going to support. And that's something that, gosh, what humans have been doing for, I guess, since there have been humans, there have been people who could tell which herbs supported certain things, like if it supported abundance or healing or whatever you needed. So it's, yeah, I'm not sure sometimes what the scariness is of that.
I don't know. To me, it feels perfectly natural, like, because that's how Papa Hood Sorcery kind of started, was on spell work and one specific oil, which is my controlling oil. I put time and effort into putting it together, because I don't know, the herbs in it just made sense. It made sense for certain things to be dominating and certain things to be controlling, and all this, and it made sense to put them together and use them to get an outcome, and it worked. So it's natural. Nothing necessarily magical about it. It's just the fact that these herbs lean towards this outcome, and if you use them in a certain way, in a certain combination, you'll get this outcome.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I've had you here for almost an hour, so I guess I should probably start wrapping up. But I'm going to put a link here to your book so that people can find that, and a link to your website. Where else can they find you to learn more about you?
Yeah, my website is a good place to start. The book is pretty good. The Thorny Path is my group is a personal favorite of mine, because that's a place that I pop into quite frequently. I pull my phone out, check what's going on there. If there's a post, comment, whatever, I can interact. So that's probably the most direct way. And of course,
yeah, I think I can probably put a link to that too on there. But,
yeah, if you want to, there's that one. There's my Facebook pages. I've got, Papa Hood Sorcery has a page, and then I've got Nagloki Shivana has a page specifically for, my authoring work and my Tibetan work. Although they kind of overlap for the most part.
yeah, and they can find. I know your books. One book is on Amazon, and then they can also find them on your website too, right under. I think it's under sorcery under books.
I have right now. I only have the Spirit Work Primer that's on Amazon. Hellfire, I am aiming, hoping, and praying for release by the end of July, because it was supposed to be out in January. But I still have pre-orders available on the site. The other books I'm working on, I think I only have the link for one other pre-order of The Skull and the Serpent, is my Tibetan workbook. And that one is going to be started probably before Hellfire even begins distribution. So, but everything that's available on Amazon will also be available through my site. And I honestly prefer people go through my site because I get a bigger cut of the paycheck. That's selfish, what else?
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, well, I'm going to put the link to all that. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you have a lot going on over at Papa Hood Sorcery. And it was really interesting to talk to you. And I learned a lot. So I'm sure a lot of other people that listen in will learn a lot too.
No problem at all. I was so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And have a good day.
You too.
See you out in the interwebs. Well, I'm in the Thorny Path group, and I'm learning a lot from it. So I'm sure I'll see you in there too.
Certainly. I do live streams in there fairly frequently. So if you or your viewers have specific questions, feel free to drop them in there. I know we probably couldn't cover half of what some people were curious about today, but if they join up in there and make a post, me or my admins or somebody will be able to answer it.
Yeah, that's true. And I've been in there, and you do have quite a collection of live streams on a bunch of different topics in there. So that's a great place too for them to start and just kind of go through and watch those.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the Thorny Path.
Sure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.